All right, welcome back to Archetype. I want to start this episode a little bit differently than usual. I want to tell you something pretty honest. I have people in my life right now that I'm afraid to tell the truth to. Not because I don't have a truth, I have a very clear one, and it changes regularly. But because I know that the moment that I say it out loud, something is going to happen. There will be a verdict, and the verdict isn't going to be whether I'm right or wrong about the thing. The verdict is going to be whether I'm a good person or a bad person. And that is the world that we live in right now. Opinions have unfortunately become moral passports. What you think about politics or current events, about who's the hero, who's the villain, has become the primary way that we decide if someone deserves to be in our lives or not. And I think, if I'm honest, that it's making us all a little crazy. So this episode is about Gene Key / Gate 17, the gate of opinions. And I've never felt more personally implicated by a gate than I do by this one right now. So let's go. Gate 17 is called Opinions in Human Design. The Gene Key calls it the way of farsightedness. We move from opinion to farsightedness. And the traditional I Ching name is following, which is interesting, right? Like lemmings following. And the programming partner, the gate that's running opposite of 17 right now is what the earth is moving through. And it's gate 18, which is about correction and realignment. The gate that senses when something is off and really wants to fix it. It's very sensitive to imperfection. That paired with opinion, that pairing is everything. So we'll come back to that. Gate 17 lives in Aries. We just hit the spring equinox, which is the astrological new year. So we are literally beginning a new cycle in a gate that is entirely devoted to how we see the world. That is not a coincidence. That is the gate of the mind's architecture. Not what you think, but how you think. Not your opinions themselves, but the mechanism that generates them, protects them, and then eventually mistakes them for reality. And it lives biologically in the pituitary gland, both the anterior and posterior, which is interesting because the pituitary is the master regulator. It tells everything else what to do. So when this gate is running in shadow, the distortion is at the top of the command chain. And the whole system ends up getting organized around a flawed signal. Okay, so let's dive into the shadow. The shadow of 17 is opinion. And I need to say clearly that having opinions isn't the problem. The problem is when your opinion becomes your identity, when it becomes the thing that you would rather protect than question. Richard Rudd puts it like this: at the shadow frequency, our opinions define and limit us. They aren't who we are. They can change at any moment, but we've welded ourselves to them so thoroughly that challenging the opinion feels like a threat to existence. The shadow has a name for this: the dilemma of the political mind. And I don't mean political in the vote for this candidate sense. I mean it in the deeper sense: the mind that takes sides, that needs one view to be right and another view to be wrong, that builds its entire sense of safety around defending a position. This is the mind that argues instead of listens. And this is what makes it so sneaky. It sounds like clarity. It sounds like conviction. It sounds like knowing what you stand for. But it is unfortunately just fear wearing the costume of certainty. So I want to talk about what's happening in the world right now, because I think we have to. This gate has never been more relevant. We are living through one of the most politically polarized moments in modern recorded history. And I want to be specific because I think that vagueness is its own kind of bypass. We have a situation in the United States where people are losing jobs, they're losing research funding, they're losing federal support for programs that they have relied on. And depending on which media ecosystem you live in, this is either a very necessary correction of a bloated and corrupt system, or it is the dismantling of democracy itself, both of which cannot be entirely true, but both have truth within them. Both feel completely true to the people holding them. We have a situation in Gaza that has been going on for over a year where casualty numbers are staggering, where children are dying, and where aid is being blocked, and where people in the same friend group, the same family, and sometimes even the same household are in completely different realities about what is happening and who is responsible. We've got climate science on one side and economic anxiety on the other. And somehow these two things have become tribal identities instead of problems to solve together. We have social media algorithms that are specifically designed, and I mean designed on purpose by engineers who understand what they were building, to feed you content that confirms what you already believe and enrages you about what the other side believes. And into all of this, 17 walks in and says, your opinion is not the truth, it's a lens. And you've been looking through it for so long that you've forgotten you're wearing it. And that's not a comfortable thing to hear. I know. I said, I have people in my life that I'm afraid to tell the truth to. That's very real. The stakes feel genuinely high right now. And I'm not here to tell you that your opinions don't matter or that both sides are equally right or to do some false equivalence spiritual bypass of what is actually serious and actually painful. I'm here to ask a different question. And this is where 18 comes in. Gate 18, the Earth gate right now, the grounding force underneath this whole transit is called correction, realignment. Its mastery is to see a pattern that needs correcting and then wait for the right timing and circumstances to offer it. To understand that the purpose of correction is to create more joy, not to be right. And its shadow, its unbalanced expression is this: to be more concerned with your own rightness than to assess whether your insight is actually adding more joy to the world. I'm going to say it again. More concerned with your own rightness than whether your insight is adding to joy. That question cuts through more mental noise and bullshit than almost anything that I have encountered in these systems, because it gets at the real motivation underneath the opinion. Are you sharing what you think because it genuinely moves someone or something toward healing, toward understanding, toward connection? Or are you sharing it to win, to establish moral superiority, to belong to the group that's correct? And I am not exempting myself from this question. I've done both, sometimes in the same conversation. 18 in its highest expression is the part of us that can see a pattern clearly, hold it lightly, and wait until there's a real opening in conversation to offer it. That is not passivity. That is precision. And right now, with 17 running the sun and 18 running the earth, those two energies are in conversation with each other in all of us. The mind that has opinions and the body that can sense whether they're actually helping. That tension is the teaching. So let's get into the body, because to me, this is always so fascinating. 17 corresponds to codon 17, CGC, which codes for the amino acid arginine. Arginine or arginine apologies, is essential for nitric oxide production. Nitric oxide regulates blood flow, immune function, and cellular communication. It's also critical for wound healing, hormone secretion, and detoxifying ammonia from the system. Energetically and emotionally, arginine is tied to mental flexibility, openness, and clear communication. So when this codon is distorted and 17 is running in the shadow pattern, you start to see things like rigid thinking, defensiveness, the need to be right in every conversation, very black and white thinking, difficulty trusting perspectives that aren't yours, so closed-minded. And you might feel this physically, tension in the jaw, tightness across the shoulders, the usual suspects, a low grade vigilance that never quite turns off, like you're always scanning for the argument that you might have to defend. That's exhausting. And that's not just psychology, that is this amino acid running in distortion. That's your cellular communication system organized around threat instead of openness. I think the pituitary connection is significant too. This is the master gland, the one that coordinates everything else. So when this gate is activated, you're working at the very tip top of the hormonal neurological command structure. And at the shadow level, the whole system gets organized around the defended opinion. And at the gift level, you start to get what Rudd calls farsightedness, a view that is wide enough to hold multiple truths at the same time. The yes and principle. And at the acidic level, this is about omniscience. The highest vibration of the pituitary reaches what it sometimes calls the full activation of the third eye. Not the metaphor, but the actual thing. The body becomes the eye. There is no longer a seer and a seen. There's no longer a my side and a your side. There's just the whole thing seen from the inside. And we're not trying to get omniscience this week, but it's good to know that it's in the DNA. This gate carries a specific lineage and families and cultures. Genetically, you often see inherited authoritarian patterns, families where one worldview was non-negotiable, where dissent from it felt dangerous, where the price of having a different opinion was disconnection. Those families teach the nervous system that beliefs are survival structures. You don't just disagree with an idea, you threaten the whole system. Epigenetically, cultures carry this too, right? Societies where questioning authority was punished, where one ideology dominated and everything outside of it was treated as a threat. This is still going on in the world today, depending on where you live. And that gets passed down not just as a story, but as body, as the part of you that tightens before you say what you actually think. And I think that many of us grew up in houses where certain topics were just off limits, and not because of genuine safety concerns, but because someone's identity depended on never having that conversation. And here we are living in a collective version of that family dinner. The world is that dinner table right now. So 17 is asking you, what did you inherit about what's okay to think and what is actually yours? So as you move through the next 6 days, here's kind of what to be aware of. Watch for the impulse to share your opinion before anyone asked for it. This is the challenge of 17 at its core. Did anybody ask your opinion? Notice how often you're offering a take into a space where no one opened a door for it. That's not a moral failing. It's the gate running. Watch for the feeling that the other person just needs more info, and then they'll agree with me. That's the shadow. The far-sighted version of this energy already knows that you can't convert anyone by talking at them. Watch for the morality test. The moment where you're not actually thinking about a topic, you're actually thinking about whether or not someone passes or fails. And that's the shadow at its most contracted. Watch for where you've gone silent, not out of wisdom, but out of fear, where you know what you think and you've swallowed it because the social cost feels too high. That silence has a texture to it. Notice that. You don't have to speak, but knowing that you're choosing not to is different from not knowing that you have something to say. Watch your pituitary. Seriously, watch for headaches, brain fog, disrupted sleep, mental static that you can't clear. We're not trying to make our nervous system do more work this week. So, I mean, as with any day, we want to be well watered, well fed, and we want to be watching for the gift to come online, right? Those moments where something clicks, where you suddenly see the pattern from above it instead of inside of it, where you understand someone you completely disagree with without having to agree with them. That's farsightedness. That's the gene key activating here. So we're going to tap for this in a few minutes. The gift is farsightedness, and it's genuinely one of the most useful gifts in the whole system. Farsightedness is the ability to see the whole matrix, not just your corner of it, not just the part that confirms what you already believe, the whole thing, with all of its moving parts and contradictions and mess and interconnections. Rudd says it like this: it's the view from the causal body, the outermost layer of your aura, the subtle layer of perception that exists beyond the linear mind, that's like your Wi-Fi connection to the world. From there, you can hold logic and intuition at the same time. You can understand both sides of an argument without needing one of them to win. And you can see a pattern clearly without being captured by it. This is also, by the way, what real journalism is supposed to be, what real science is supposed to be, what real leadership is supposed to look like. The ability to gather more information than you're comfortable with and still track towards something true. And the very practical version of this looks like knowing the difference between having a view and then or being imprisoned by that view. It can say, I think this without needing you to think it also. It can listen to a perspective it fundamentally disagrees with and still find a thread of humanity in it. That doesn't mean that everything is equally valid. Some things are just wrong. Some things cause real fucking harm. 17 at the gift level doesn't flatten everything out into spiritual mush. It gets more precise, not less. But the precision comes from seeing more, not from defending harder. You get me? Think about the people in your life who have this quality, who can hold a complex situation without needing to simplify it into good guys, bad guys, who can change their mind without having to have a big crisis about it, who can say, I don't know, and mean it not as a cop-out, but as the most honest thing that they can offer. That is the gift working in real time. And it's available to all of us. It's always available to us. It's especially available this week, not just to the people who have 17 chart. Here is what I love about this transit happening right now. We are at the astrological new year, the spring equinox, the moment when in nearly every ancient tradition, the world begins again. Aries is the first sign, fire initiation, the part of the zodiac that does not look backwards. It asks, what are you starting? What are you willing to be new at? And we're entering that season through 17, the gate that asks you to examine the lens that you're seeing through. That's not accidental. A new year is only actually new if you bring something different to it. If you carry the same defended worldview into a new season, you don't get a new year. You get a new calendar with the same old story. 17 at the gift level says the new year starts when you're willing to see it differently, not to abandon what you know, not to pretend that your concerns aren't real, but to hold your perspective a little more lightly. to be slightly less sure, slightly more curious, slightly more willing to let the full picture come into view. 18 is grounding all of this in the earth, and it asks, is what you're seeing actually moving toward joy? Is your correction, your opinion, your truth, is it in service of something that creates more life? Or is it just keeping the argument going? That's the invitation of this 6-day window. Not to stop thinking, not to stop caring, but to think from a wider place and to let the earth teach you when to speak and when to wait.